The atmosphere ignites. A deep, heavy violet saturates the horizon, thick with the weight of 1 billion tons of suspended moisture. Concrete liquefies under the relentless kinetic bombardment, not from heat, but from total molecular saturation. Gravity seems to cease its traditional hold, as the distinction between air and ocean vanishes into a singular, pressurized mist. The first drop strikes a parched concrete sidewalk with the force of a small pebble, leaving a dark, jagged mark that never dries. Within seconds, it is joined by a second, 100, a million. The rhythmic pitter-patter of a spring shower is absent, replaced by a low-frequency hum, as the atmosphere itself begins to liquefy. Water cascades from the eaves of houses, not in droplets, but in shimmering ribbons of liquid glass. The drainage pipes groan under the sudden pressure, their metal joints shrieking, as they are forced to funnel volumes of fluid they were never designed to hold. In the streets, the asphalt begins to take on a strange, slick sheen, reflecting the dying light of a sun that will not be seen again for 10 centuries. The air becomes a heavy, saturated sponge, making every breath feel like a struggle against the rising tide. This is the end. But to understand why, we must rewind to the beginning. The rewind, the fragility of equilibrium in the world we once knew, the hydrological cycle was a masterpiece of planetary engineering. It was a closed system of perfect balance, governed by the delicate dance of solar radiation and gravity. Sunlight would strike the vast expanses of our oceans, vibrating the water molecules at the surface, until they gained enough kinetic energy to break their hydrogen bonds and escape into the air as invisible vapor. This vapor would rise, cooling as it ascended into the thinner layers of the atmosphere, eventually condensing around microscopic particles of dust or sea salt to form clouds. This process, known as latent heat flux, moved energy from the surface to the stratosphere, keeping the planet's temperature regulated. For millions of years, this cycle ensured that for every liter of water that fell as rain, an equal amount was lifted back into the sky through evaporation. The Earth stayed hydrated, but never overwhelmed. The soil acted as a massive biological filter, soaking up the excess and storing it in deep underground aquifers, through a process of slow percolation. Inertia kept our weather patterns predictable, and the centrifugal force of the planet's rotation distributed moisture in a series of Hadley cells, creating the deserts and rainforests we mapped our civilizations by. We relied on the fact that clouds eventually run out of moisture. We relied on the sun to return. The deep dive, the millennial deluge, but now, that equilibrium has shattered. A fundamental shift in the global thermohaline circulation, or a sudden, massive injection of water vapor into the stratosphere, has created a feedback loop that cannot be broken. The atmosphere has become an infinite reservoir. The troposphere is no longer a layer of gas, it is a colossal, saturated ocean suspended above our heads. The thermal capacity of the air has increased to the point where it can hold thousands of % more moisture than ever before. This is the dawn of the millennial deluge. As the first year of the rain commences, the initial novelty of the storm fades into a grinding, gray reality. In the first 10 days, the ground reaches its saturation point. The soil, once a firm foundation for our civilizations, turns into a viscous slurry. At the atomic level, the pore water pressure rises until the effective stress between soil particles reaches zero. This eliminates the friction that holds hillsides together. Massive landslides begin to occur, not as sudden events, but as slow, unstoppable flows of liquid earth that consume entire suburbs. Foundations of homes begin to shift as the clay minerals expand, exerting thousands of kilograms of pressure against basement walls. The wood within the walls swells, absorbing the relentless humidity, causing frames to warp and doors to jam permanently in their sockets. The electrical grid is the first great casualty. High-voltage transformers, designed to withstand seasonal storms, find no respite. The constant moisture creates conductive paths across insulators, leading to brilliant, blue-white arcs of electricity that hiss in the downpour before the system fails. This is ionization on a massive scale. Cities fall into a permanent twilight. Without the hum of air conditioners or the glow of streetlights, the only sound is the roar of the water, a white noise that occupies every frequency from 20 Hz to 20 kHz, a sound that vibrates in the chest and numbs the mind. By year 5, the geography of the planet begins to rewrite itself. Every river has become a monster. The Amazon, the Nile, the Mississippi, they have burst their banks and drowned their floodplains under 5 meters of standing water. The concrete levees and steel dams, symbols of human engineering, are eroded by the sheer kinetic energy of the flow. Water is a universal solvent, and over enough time, it carves through anything. The silt and debris carried by these runaway rivers settle in the lowlands, burying the remains of coastal cities under layers of mud and shattered glass. In these submerged urban canyons, the water is not clear. It is a dark, chemical soup, thick with the oils, plastics, and pollutants of a drowned industrial age. Oxygen levels in the water plummet as organic matter rots, creating vast anoxic zones where only anaerobic bacteria can survive. The smell is a thick, cloying mixture of ozone and decay. Above the waves, the atmosphere is a thick, warm blanket. Because the cloud cover is absolute, the greenhouse effect is amplified. Heat from the planet's interior and the trapped solar radiation cannot escape into space. The temperature begins to rise, not into a scorching desert heat, but into a stifling, tropical humidity of 45 degrees Celsius, that makes the air feel like a physical weight. Most turn away from the void. But here at Velastrix, we decode the math behind the chaos. Join the archive by subscribing now. As we reach the century mark, the botanical world undergoes a radical transformation. The trees of the old world, the oaks and pines that require distinct seasons and dry roots, have long since succumbed to root rot. Their massive trunks collapse into the rising swamps, creating treacherous underwater forests. In their place, a new ecosystem of hypersaturated flora emerges. Mosses and lichens grow to the size of shrubs, coating every vertical surface in a carpet of vibrant, wet green. Fungi thrive in the eternal damp, their mycelial network stretching for kilometers beneath the surface of the water, breaking down the remains of our world. The very air is thick with spores, a biological mist that clogs the lungs of any creature not adapted to the new environment. The oceans themselves are changing. The constant influx of fresh water from the 1,000-year rain creates a layer of low-salinity water at the surface. This freshwater lens prevents the normal mixing of nutrients from the deep sea. The Great Barrier Reef and other coral systems dissolve, as the ocean's pH levels shift toward acidity. The marine life that once defined the blue planet, the whales, the sharks, the vibrant schools of tropical fish, fades away, replaced by gelatinous organisms and specialized scavengers that can navigate the lightless, murky depths of the new global ocean. By year 500, the architectural legacy of humanity is a series of crumbling skeletons. Steel reinforcement inside concrete begins to oxidize, expanding to 3 times its original volume and cracking the stone from within. Skyscrapers in New York and Tokyo lean at impossible angles as the bedrock beneath them becomes soft and unstable. The constant percussion of the rain has polished the jagged edges of the ruins into smooth, unrecognizable shapes. There is no fire here, the world is too wet for a flame to exist. There is only the slow, silent work of erosion. The monuments we built to last millennia are being sanded down by the gentle, persistent touch of trillions of raindrops. The atmosphere has become so heavy that the barometric pressure at sea level has doubled to 2,000 millibars. This affects the very physics of flight and sound. Sound waves travel further and faster in the dense, wet air, making the distant thunder sound like it is happening right behind your ears. The sky is a permanent gradient of slate and charcoal. There is no sunrise or sunset, only a slight brightening of the gray fog for 12 hours followed by a deepening into absolute obsidian. As the 10th century of the rain nears its end, the earth is a world of water. The continents have not disappeared, but they have been redefined. The coastlines are gone, replaced by vast, inland seas and archipelagos of high-altitude peaks. The humans of this era, if any remain, have become aquatic nomads. Their lives are governed by the tides and the rhythm of the downpour. They have forgotten the concept of dry. To them, the sun is a myth, a legendary golden orb from an age of giants. Their skin is pale, their eyes adapted to the low-light world of the eternal storm. Eventually, the atmosphere begins to stabilize. The massive concentrations of water vapor have finally scrubbed the air of the pollutants that triggered the event. The thermal feedback loop begins to weaken. The rain does not stop all at once. It begins to thin, the heavy roar fading into a steady drizzle, then a light mist. One afternoon, in the 999th year, a single beam of golden light pierces through a rift in the clouds. It strikes the surface of the global ocean, reflecting off the ripples with a brilliance that hasn't been seen in 30 generations. The clouds begin to break apart, drifting away like the tattered sails of a ghost ship. The world that emerges is unrecognizable. It is a planet of vibrant, terrifying green, a world where the scars of the industrial age have been washed away and replaced by a gargantuan, waterlogged wilderness. The silence that follows the rain is the loudest sound of all. It is the silence of a planet that has been cleansed, reset, and reborn through the simple, relentless power of the most common substance in the universe. We are reminded that we do not own the Earth, we are merely guests of its chemical whims. To explore the impossible and visualize the unknown, subscribe to Velastrix.